Today on Masters of the Mini Comics.
He-Man is like such an incredible, malleable property. I'm interested is telling a cool story that a He-Man fan that honors He, which we're introduced to Garrick
Oh
and
yes, dude, I'm telling you, man. People gave a lot of positive feedback. First person to create any kind of background with this character.
right. I'd written Cosmic He-Man.
There you go.
Elements in Viper's Vice for Cosmic He-Man.
Hey guys, what's going on? Rob here. That's right. Hey, we got something special this week on Masters of Mini Comics. I'm going to be bringing in some of the behind the scenes action here with none other than the writer of the comics that basically is writing all the comics that I've been doing recently. So he's kind of like my partner in crime because I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing without his writing. And here he is, Josh Sky.
Thanks for having me, Rob. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, man. I'm it's a little long overdue for us to or for the audience to know that we know each other, I guess. But we've hung out before in person. Went over to a convention in California, and I was able to spend the day over there. I got to hang out with him and to meet some of the other people who were at the convention that watched. One of them watched my stuff. And a lot of people, of course, knew He-Man, and it's kind of surreal, isn't it, that dude, you're writing for He-Man?
Yeah, honestly, it's still hard to believe, quite frankly. I mean, I've told the story before, but really,
Yeah.
like when the opportunity came along to be able to write He-Man, I didn't even believe them when they said, "Are you interested in writing He-Man?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." Me and every other nerd
uh,
on out here in Hollywood. So I was just
yeah,
really
yeah.
blown away when I got the shot to do it, and it's been
Mhm.
really a privilege and an opportunity, and the most importantly, it's a lot of fun, I think. So
Yeah,
yeah.
man. It's so crazy that your legacy is printed and going to live forever. Isn't it crazy?
Yeah, I think about that. It's so funny. Life is so. I told you this recently. I was at Grayskull Con
Oh yeah.
in
Yes.
Germany,
Yes.
and during the convention, my mom had a stroke, which was super sad. Not to be a downer, and I had to go back, and I've been taking care of my mom, and
Yep.
thankfully, she's on the road to recovery.
That's
You
great.
know, and
Congratulations.
I love my mom a lot, but it's
Yes,
made me think a lot about what life is about, right?
I get it.
And what matters. And interestingly enough, I just feel like you get so lost in all this stuff, and you realize, well, what really counts? Like, why am I writing in the first place? And trying to write just to tell people great stories and hopefully help them in some way, whether it's
Mhm.
a story that teaches them something or makes them laugh or really entertains them. And I guess like the reason I'm saying that is because you're talking about legacy is just I just care about writing stories that people like, and that people
Yeah.
enjoy, hope, and get something out of it. So it's one of the most rewarding things I've ever done, quite frankly, and I'm really
Wow. Wow.
it's actually a privilege. And but the nice thing about it is I feel like just writing in general is a privilege. Being able to write, because I've met
Sure.
yeah no I've known some older writers who like some of the original people who've written on He-Man in the 80s and
Yeah.
stuff, and
Yeah. Yeah.
they're not really writing so much for a lot of big brands right now, but they're still writing their own stuff, and I think that work is just as
Nice.
important too.
Oh wow.
Anyway, sorry if I'm going off here in the
No,
weeds,
no,
but
no. That's awesome. You kind of gave us a little bit of an idea of where you're coming from.
yeah,
There's a few interviews out there already. We won't get too far into depth of your history and stuff like that because
sure,
people can
sure,
look you up and
sure.
they know you're from Hawaii and that you were in Marvel for a little bit and then now you work at Netflix, and this writing gig is basically what you do kind of as a freelance, right? Contractor.
I'm a freelancer, yeah,
Yeah,
hired
yeah.
gun, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if people knew that fact about it, but so there's probably a certain amount of limits that you get, from Mattel and as far as these comics and everything, and what the
Well,
plans are for the future, I imagine.
well, yeah. I mean, here's what I could say. Like, first off, pretty much, I would. I mean, in my perspective, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but from what I've seen, most comic book writing is either independent or done via freelance. Like,
Oh,
so people imagine that there are these offices where like comic book writers are working on stuff
yeah, yeah,
24/7.
yeah, 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 totally,
Which
yeah,
would be really cool. I wish it was like that,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
a lot of it's self-driven and self-started, and a lot
Oh,
of it is freelance. You know, like the cool magical office is really just, you know, a guy or woman, like, who's just at their desk with a bunch of action figures, and they're like, "What? This would be a cool plot," and
oh, really?
stack
That's
comics.
cool. That's
So
yeah.
but in the 30s and 40s and probably upwards to the 60s, when like Marvel had its bullpen and DC had, you know, a large editorial staff. So yeah, you had more of that. But even back then, a lot of it was freelance. So
Uh-huh. Oh,
but
wow, that's a cool little insight.
yeah. So in terms of like marching orders from any of the companies, I mean, it all kind of works the same no matter the company. But
Uh-huh.
but depending on the brand, you get a lot of latitude. And what I
Mhm,
can say is that He-Man is like such an incredible malleable property. I mean, you've got fantasy and science fiction and
mhm, mhm, mhm.
horror and all these different genres in there, so it gives you a lot of flexibility to do a lot of different things.
Right.
So in terms of like what I'm allowed to do, I mean, I'm not so much interested. I think Tim Seeley had said it so right. He said, like, we're here to make toys, not break toys. And he wasn't saying that even for the company. He was saying that like us as like freelancers, right?
Ah,
Like people who work on things like He-Man.
yeah.
So what I'm really interested is telling a cool story that a He-Man fan that honors He-Man,
Sure,
honestly, and hopefully
sure,
extends the pantheon and logical, really building on the shoulders of the giants before me. So,
sure, sure.
you know, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I would say, speaking of that story stuff, when they introduced you to the idea of starting to write for Masters of the Universe, it seems like your beginning, or what really has brought you into this, is really this whole Snake Man storyline.
Yeah.
That's all you, right?
Yeah. I mean, for Rise of the Snake Men, what I can say is that, yeah, I had come in during this initiative where they knew that they wanted to do stories about the Snake Men.
Yeah.
I've titled many of the comics that I've worked on. I did not title Rise of the Snake Men.
Oh,
That was kind of already in place, and I think that was in place for the overall line. And I could say this because this stuff has been released, and it's not like
mhm, mhm,
hidden information. It's totally out there.
mhm.
But basically, yeah, I'd been brought in, and I there's actually a TV episode also for the 2000 X series called Rise of the Snake Men that
Oh,
so I really did my homework, and I went back and I like
mhm.
watched all the Snake Men episodes I
Yeah,
could, and all
yeah,
the
those are
Snake
awesome.
Men comics I could. So
Yeah,
but yeah,
yeah.
I've been working on a lot of snake driven storylines starting from wave 11
Mhm,
through now, and now, which has
mhm.
been announced already, they're doing the Filmation
That's right.
cartoon stuff. So I've been working on. I worked on at least the latest one that is just getting released, which was Mask of the Magi, which is a really fun issue at an
Yeah,
absolute blast. But that's different from this overall arc I've written from Wave 11 up until
yeah.
the recent release of what was it of Lady Slither.
Yeah, yeah. So if we go through them, it's kind of hard to remember them in order, but I think I've performed all of these except the Duplico comic. You've I haven't got a chance to do that one yet, but you wrote that one as well, right?
I did. I did write The Legend of Duplico, which was really fun. It was cool
Uh,
to write that adventure at Apps. They're all fun to write. They're all
yeah,
really
yeah,
fun.
yeah. I need to check that one out because I think that we'll be able to do our own little isolated story on that one.
Yeah.
Um, and so if we go for the snake ones, Rise of the Snake Men, Heart of the Snake, Poison from the Stars. That's another snake one.
Right. That's another
Uh,
snake. Horde of
yep.
Frogmonger has Snake Man elements. Um,
Ah,
Even the Legend of Duplico actually has Snake Man elements. The
Crisis of the Multicore.
Crisis of the Multicore, I don't think it had snake elements in it, actually. Oh wait, no, that's not true. In the
That's
beginning of Christ of the Multicore, we see an alternate Eternia where we say a snake He-Man, and we see Castle Snake Skull, right? Which is
Oh
that.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
there was a
yeah.
snake element in that. Then there's Serpent Siege, Viper's Vice, and
Yep,
then
yep.
there are some standalone non-snake stories like The Faces Within, which was
Oh, the Many Faces.
Many Faces issue, which
Yeah,
was really fun to write.
yeah, that's a
The
great
Bones
one.
Beneath, which were introduced to Garrick,
Oh
and
yes, dude, I'm telling you, man. People gave a lot of positive feedback about that one. You know, there was a good consensus, and that story hit a lot of people. What was your motivation on that one? What was kind of where did you come up with the title?
sure.
What's your concept? Did you like marry it off of like a Conan story or something? Or
No, I don't think so. I mean, but I love Conan, of course, and I
yeah,
love fantasy and Dungeons and Dragons and all the stuff that we all like in this space. But
yeah, 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 yeah.
for Bones Beneath, it was kind of a there are actually a couple of alternate storylines that I had written about. We needed an origin story for a skeleton warrior, and I wanted to write something really compelling.
Mhm,
And well, I always go for that or try for that, as any writer does.
mhm,
But I did write two storylines, and those were both
mm,
submitted. And then the
mm,
one that seemed that the people at the company liked was the one about Garrick and his
mm,
daughter Roxana.
mm.
So so I took it and I ran with it. I turned in an outline, and that outline got approved. And then I wrote the script.
Oh.
And where does it come from? I don't know. I wish I knew. I think it comes from just a place where stories just kind of hit you, and that one just kind of appeared. The title was about, I guess, when I was kind of looking at these skeletal warrior characters, thinking like each of those skeleton warriors that you see, right? Whether it be He-Man or like a Ray Harryhausen film, each of those was a real warrior at one point, right? If you follow the story. So I was thinking I wanted to tell one story about one skeletal warrior that really could show you how deep any character could be. So,
Yeah. Wow. So
but
they
go
approached
on.
you a couple of months ago or last year or whatever and said, "Hey, we're doing toys of the bone characters that you see on the box art. We want to do a story about those guys and come up. We'll give you a couple of weeks to come up with something and let us know what you think." Is it like that?
Um, the it kind of works like with a lot of these comic book companies where editorial is generally pretty busy, right? And so when you're a professional, when you get the opportunity to write professionally, a lot of it you kind of have to you get some direction, sure, but I
Mhm,
can only talk about my process, which is pretty much the process for any freelance assignment I do, no matter the company, which is the company will generally have they'll be like, hey, we want to do a story about X, right? Or
mhm,
X character. And
mhm,
you go, okay, and I'll generally pitch a few ideas. It could be over email or it could be over,
mhm,
a Google Doc, and I'll send it over. And those will get reviewed. And generally, if one of them hits home, they go, okay, we like this one, great. And I don't know about how other writers work. This is how I work. And this isn't any way that the company really dictated. But what I like to do is I like to have whoever I'm submitting material
mhm.
to see that we're on the same page, that hey, we agree on this, right? And
Oh, okay.
the best way to do that is to submit an outline. So I usually write a
Mhm,
one page. I try to tell the story in one page about what happens,
mhm,
and hopefully that gets approved. Or if they have notes, I address those notes, and then I write the story. But
mhm.
but yeah, for this, what's interesting about the Bones Beneath is, I mean, there's a number of issues where I've written alternate stories that didn't get approved. So they're like alternate cuts of certain scripts, alternate cuts of different stories that appeared where characters
Mhm.
either get cut out or things change, or whole new stories that just get buried. So that does happen too. Um,
Mhm.
Rise of Snake Men, which is wave 11 where I first started, I had written probably two or three outlines before I really got the hang of like how this thing works, right?
Oh, wow.
Because there's a learning curve for me, just like how anyone on any property will probably have a learning curve generally
Mhm.
about like what's acceptable and understanding. I think the biggest thing that I had to wrap my mind around when I first did He-Man was like, He-Man's not like Marvel, right? Like Marvel is very optimistic, but a lot of those characters are conflicted, right? Like,
Mhm.
you know, they're flawed, right? And
Mhm. Mhm.
He-Man is kind of like He-Man is not conflicted. He-Man has a very good idea of like good and evil, right?
Sure. Sure.
So that was kind of that he has kind of a super confidence that a lot of Marvel characters don't come from. And I do come from probably a lot, you know, a lot more than DC, the Marvel school of thinking, because I worked there on the corporate level for like 5 years and I'd done some
Uh-huh.
writing for Marvel. You know, a
Uh-huh.
lot of my
Uh,
formative years were spent there. So
yeah.
that
Yeah.
was something kind of like new I had to learn. But no,
Mhm.
honestly, all the people I've interfaced with at Mattel are really smart and really interesting and
Mhm. Mhm.
have a very firm understanding of the brand, and they're just like you and I. They're fans, you know.
So
And which
yeah.
means they really care. They really care about this stuff. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, I bet. Yeah. So, how long ahead of time it varies when they approach you about a storyline and I want this done by this, and then you've told me before, right? You don't even know when it's coming out, right? I mean, like it could be because you have a hard time getting the getting the toy, and you're like, oh, I didn't even know when they're gonna release this.
Right, right. So yeah, just to clarify, like what I tell a lot of people is fans know more than me generally.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, 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 yeah.
what's coming out, you know, like, I get directions just like anyone at a company and I follow them, but there is like I'm sure there's a broader strategy and I know I don't know a
Like,
lot. I get my news from the different toy outlets just like you guys
yeah,
do.
yeah, 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 all
And
the
they're
guys that
surprised. I'm like, oh my
awesome.
gosh, that's coming out. I gotta get that.
Well, I'm
So
just saying, like, when you wrote some of these comics, did you wait a year before you saw your writing in print? Did you wait 6 months, 9 months, 8 months?
oh, before I
Like,
before
you
I
saw a final product, like, "Oh my gosh, I
oh
wrote
yeah,
this 2
yeah,
years
like
ago."
right, right.
You know?
Yeah, there is a lead time. I mean, I did Maui Comic-Con at the end of December of last year, and
Uh-huh,
I had been writing on He-Man probably for about a year at that point.
uh-huh.
So,
Oh, wow.
so I had not seen it was sad because like at that convention I didn't have any He-Man stuff because none of my stuff had really come out yet. And it was
Oh.
just starting to trickle out by the time that like Wave 11 just started kind of percolating at that time.
Oh, wow.
No,
Okay.
no, that's not true. I think I just had one or two waves of characters out by then. No, that's not true. That wasn't completely true. But now that I'm remembering, it was very few, and it was hard to get also. So because
Wow,
this
so
stuff sells
yeah.
out. It's so popular.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I know when especially when it first started coming out. Like,
For
"Oh my
sure.
gosh."
Yeah.
But so it was about a year then, a year of waiting until you saw it, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I
Yeah. I
finally
mean,
see it."
it wasn't until recently that I actually like saw it in the wild. I mean, I've seen it in the wild, but I meant like at like Walmart or Target, like my own stuff. Because generally, it's like you know how it is as a collector. Because I'm a collector too. Like you show up and there's just empty pegs everywhere, and
Of
you're like,
course,
no,
of course,
like
of course.
right, or specific characters. But I just remember it was probably like not even maybe 2 months ago max that I just saw like King Hiss hanging on the peg, and I'm
Uh-huh.
like, oh my gosh, I'm like in a store in
Mhm,
my local town in California. I'm like, gosh, here it is. That's so amazing, and I
mhm,
bought I
mhm.
bought it, of course. Um, and but I was in New
Yeah, yeah.
Zealand. I was in New Zealand earlier this year, and my wife and I went to a comic book shop, and it must be one of the most remote comic shops in the world.
Mhm,
It was
mhm,
on the South Island of New Zealand,
mhm.
and I think it was called I think it might have been called Dead Video. And we went in there and they had Wave 11 characters there. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I wrote that comic and it's here in this comic shop here in New Zealand, in this, I believe in the
Oh,
southern hemisphere
awesome.
of the world. So that was really cool.
That
But
must
yeah,
be
it,
really
took it
cool.
took a while. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, yeah. Now, of the storyline that you're so immersed in with the Snake Man, um, what's happening right now? So you
Okay.
started with
Okay.
something. Tell us like the arc of what's happening,
Sure.
what
Sure. So
stuff like that.
the story arc that I really wanted to write was, they gave me this assignment for Rise of the Snake Men, and I wanted to tell a story about the Snake Men we hadn't seen before that really puts the characters in immediate danger. So I started off this story where He-Man has been poisoned and he's on the verge of death, right?
Mhm,
And he ends up while he's on the verge of death writing Battle Cat. Goddess comes to him and says to find
Bolt Man.
Boltman,
Yeah,
and
that's right.
he does, and Boltman, he ends up waking up in Boltman's tent because he literally blacks out
That's right.
after that.
That's right. Yes.
And Boltman has the powers of molecular regeneration, right?
Sure.
So
Sure. 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 Sure.
Boltman heals He-Man, and what happens is um, Stratos and Man-at-Arms show up, and He-Man's relieved to see them. But Boltman is, first off, Boltman's like, how the hell do you know where I'm located? But also Boltman, because given his powers, he can tell that these aren't the people that they claim to be.
Yeah.
So he blasts them, and it's their skin shreds off, and it's revealed to be I believe Rattler and Cobra Khan. It was two snake villains, right? They were snake men, and they ended up battling each other.
Yeah.
And the snake men flee, right? The snake men flee, and He-Man is just like, he wants to chase them, and Boltman basically says, no, we have to save our energy for future battles. And he's like, we can't let them win. And he goes, we never will, but come, my friend. And the whole time he's been like making a giant batch of porridge, right? So he's like, come, my friend, let's eat. Let's eat. He goes, there'll always be snakes in the grass.
That's right.
So then, so that story is connected to something much larger, right? Since it's the rise of the Snake Men, I wanted the Snake Men, to have a plot that we have, that would be really interesting. So at the same time that this assassination attempt is made on He-Man, another assassination attempt is made on Skeletor, which is seen in
Assassins.
That's right. Where they're having dinner.
We see a bunch of Snake Men who are at this dinner, and they're all pledging false fealty to Skeletor.
That's right.
And then they try to kill him. And ironically, the Masters of the Universe have to rescue Skeletor, which they are loath to do.
Right? It's Hypno and Roboto.
Hypno and Roboto have to
teleport in there to save him.
Right. And one of my favorite moments is, Tongue Lasher tries to kill, Skeletor, and his tongue gets, lopped off, and that becomes a monster of its own, which I thought was really cool. Tongue Lasher's like, escape! So they managed to save Skeletor, and then a third assassination attempt is happening simultaneously, and we see that in the Horde of Frogmonger, actually. And Horde of Frogmonger was a really fun issue to write, because you didn't have much to work with. You basically had this like barely an image of a character in like a jail cell, right? Or that cellar.
Sure.
Right, it's based on that sticker image from the castle.
Wow, yeah. So you're the first person to create any kind of background with this character?
Correct. Yeah.
Really? Oh my goodness. So
right. Well, I didn't. Right. Well, there was there were images, of course, that existed of this character, but in terms of story, there was nothing. I didn't have. I wrote up a story, submitted, and that got approved, and then I wrote based on that story. I wrote Horde of Frogmonger, which was really fun. It was a really fun one to write. But yeah,
he's like a prince or something like that. Or was he?
His name was Lucius, and he was he was like a dark wizard prince, and he
he transformed.
He was during like kind of a medieval time, and I mean, it's always medieval, but it was like centuries ago in Eternia. There's this, there've been multiple wars against the Snake Men, right? Starting from back in Preternian days, right? What ended up happening was Lucius had sold dark magic and weaponry to both sides, the Snake Men and the world of men, and and the kingdoms and such. So they both punished him, and the kingdoms had exiled him and transformed him into Frogmonger. This warped frog creature.
Sure.
He was very, very wealthy. He was very, very wealthy, and he had many artifacts, and amongst them was the Key of Keys, right? Which is a key that can grant you access to any place in the universe, real or unreal, imaginary, futuristic, wherever, which I thought was, or dreamlike, or in people's dreams.
You made that up.
I made that up. Yeah.
Wow.
That was really fun.
Awesome, man.
And, again, this isn't anything proprietary or secret. It's kind of like a wrestling match, like in the sense that here's what we'd like in this. Here are elements we would like in it. And just make sure that whatever story you're telling has those elements, right? And usually it's probably characters that they really want, and and go from there. But I do a lot of homework, And what I mean by that is
Yeah.
I watch a lot of He-Man cartoons and episodes, Filmation 2000. I watch current series, and I read a lot of as many comics as I can, and also the mini comics. And particularly, I'm trying to match that tone in mini comics, that sort of excitement and
Yes.
adventure, color,
Yes.
you know. And but anyway, yeah. But in Horde of Frogmonger, the Snake Men had tried to make an assassination attempt on Randor, right? King Randor.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
So basically, the Snake Men want to create a new world order, right? They want to challenge the current world order of Eternia.
Well, they're trying to take over. Yeah, the planet.
They're trying to take over, so they're trying to kill both He-Man, Skeletor, and Randor. So I thought that was like a compelling story to start off with, and so each of the stories hints at each other, but is standalone, right?
Yeah. Okay, so the concept of the Snake Men has always kind of been that where they want to dominate and all that stuff.
Yeah, they always want to dominate. But what I really like about the Snake Men, and what I find compelling about the Snake Men, is they're all kind of like Starscream in my mind. And what I mean by that is like Starscream, like, I should be the one in charge, right?
Sure.
So and there's this quote I love that my uncle taught me when I was really young, which was, "There's Joshua, there's no honor amongst thieves." And I think about that a lot when I'm writing the Snake Men, because I'm like, they're all thieves basically. Like, just because one character is going to gain power, that means the other Snake Men are going to be like, well, wait a minute, I should have the power.
Sure.
So to me, there's a lot of rich conflict that's kind of like embedded in these characters, specifically the Snake Men. I mean, the Snake Men, they're snakes. They're all going to backstab each other. So it creates this like power dynamic where they're always, on my take at least of the Snake Men, that they're always vying against each other. I feel like that makes for interesting reading. So, and we see that actually in some of these issues that I've written.
Yeah, and then eventually you brought in Lady Slither, but at first it was some snake goddess. So there was two female snake characters, right?
Yeah, Snake Goddess was a reference to, I was going through older characters and stuff, and just kind of, surfing the He-Man universe, the Master Universe, in the encyclopedias and back issues. And I came across this character, and I'm like, gosh, this character hasn't been used. I don't think it's been used since the 80s. And I think it was out of the Spanish comics. And I thought, oh, this is such an interesting, compelling character. So I brought that character into the story, which I believe, if I recall, sorry, it's been some time since I wrote these, and I've had my mind on other stories, but Viper's Vice.
Viper's Vice. Yeah, I was about to look at it. Yeah, you looked at the list. Yeah, it's
right.
That's the one. Yeah,
right. Even in that story, and like, hopefully everyone's read that. So disclaimer, right? But even in that story, it starts off where we're in the aftermath of battle, and everyone's been turned to stone. And it's Snake Face is now king, and he's like, I don't need you, King Hiss. I'm the king now, right?
That's right.
I'm King Snake Face. So anyway, but yeah, I found that character to be very interesting, and I wanted to write her in. And she appears as Coil, which is this like massive snake creature, and then ends up reveals her true form. So that was a fun one to write. Yeah.
What other characters did you invent? Because basically you invented Lady Slither, or invented her background as well. Frogmonger.
So I mean, a lot of these characters, already kind of existed in the pantheon. I mean, I think Axel had created many characters and designs, many Snake Men and Snake Women. Axel Jimenez.
Yeah.
And feel free to correct me on this, but I believe Lady Slither was originally an Axel design, and the Frogmonger, existed originally in that sticker.
Yes.
And then designs were made from that sticker, and they rendered a character from it. And then, but yeah, I'd come up with the backstory based on the images that I saw. I wrote that backstory. Like Lucius, for example, who is like who Frogmonger was before Frogmonger. Yeah, like that whole tapestry of his backstory. Yeah, I'd written Cosmic He-Man.
There you go.
elements in Viper's Vice for Cosmic He-Man that originally existed. That was actually all Motu lore. You know, the Cosmic Egg, Cosmic Crystal, and the powers that it would imbue. I had read up on that. I thought that's so cool. You know, what would happen if the Snake Man got it? I thought, well, what happens if He-Man gets it? How could that change him? And that's kind of how Cosmic He-Man kind of just arrived in that story. And I think Cosmic He-Man is really cool. He's kind of scary to write for me because he's so powerful that I think He-Man is like, this is like so much power that it kind of hits this level of like too powerful, right? Ultra power, right? Like Thanos.
Yeah. One of the latest comics, though, we see some Cosmic He-Man stuff that maybe people need to pay attention to.
For sure. I mean, yeah, Cosmic He-Man appears in 3 issues thus far. Will he appear in more? I really couldn't tell you. And I mean that I don't know. But he's in Viper's Vice. He's in gosh, what was the story? Oh, here's another one I totally forgot to mention. Eternia Remastered was another one he appears in. And then he appears in Sword of the Serpent. Yeah.
So that was part of the lore. What else is part of the lore that you've tried to introduce into the storylines or the arc and all that?
So here's kind of my personal process for writing in general. And for me, when I write a He-Man adventure, and I can't speak to anybody else's process, this is just Josh talking here. But I generally read as much material as I can, right? Specifically about the given thing I'm trying to write about within the Motu universe. And as an example, for the story Poison from the Stars, which was Mossman related, I had read something somewhere. I read an old issue of one of the mini comics from the 80s. And it was describing something so cool that I didn't really see talked about too much, that the Snake Men came from another world and that they were these conquerors. And that they had conquered and ruled other worlds, and then they came to Eternia/Eternia. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's so cool. And I thought, how did they get here, and how did they get trapped here, and like, why are they here now? Why did they stay here? None of that was explained in anything I could find. So I thought that, wow, so that's where I came up with the idea that they had arrived on the starship Reptilica.
That's awesome, man. That's
right. Hopefully one day a Reptilica toy would be made. That would be rad as hell. So anyway, but that's generally kind of my process when I'm expanding in lore. Same thing with in the issue The Faces Within, right? I had read up about Many Faces, and they had mentioned that, you know, in back issues and in the lore of that, it was written that his name used to be Prakaido, and he was a very handsome actor.
Oh yeah, I meant to ask about that. So that's a part of the lore.
So that was all originally lore, and I wanted to build on that. So Merwin was his barker. So Merwin was a new invention, that character.
Okay.
And Merwin was this kind of carnival barker who would get him gigs, right? He would stand outside the caravan and get him gigs. And Merwin was a very loyal friend, and that's where I believe it was the Tome of Knowledge was the name of the artifact, which was a new artifact. But but basically, he wanted to give Prakaido a chance to become his old self. But in the story, of course, it comes at the cost of everyone being inverted, and he doesn't want to pay that price. It's about him accepting himself, you know. So the one thing I would love to impart to people who, you know, people always go like, how do you write for He-Man? And I'm like, your guess is as good as mine, because I feel like you can't really predict what your trajectory will be when it comes to writing for any of these properties, right? The only thing you can control is your own original stuff. And I argue that is the stuff that will eventually open the doors to opportunities writing for properties like He-Man or Jurassic Park or, you know, Conan or any of that stuff, right? You know, writing original stories that are really compelling and fun. And the nice thing is, if you write something original, you own the thing, right? And you have full control. And that's really cool into itself. A lot of people usually don't like listening to that advice or that outlook, but really that's what, for me as a writer, started opening doors. Originally, I thought I did all backwards. I did want to start writing for all these properties and stuff, But the thing that opens the door is your own original stuff. And by the time you get hired to write on original properties, hopefully you still feel that your original stuff that you want to put out there is just as important, right?
Well, you have an original story that you just came out with. You're going a second leg of ordering them, right? I saw some posts that you had.
Right. I recently did a book called a book of short stories called Other Worlds. It's a comics anthology. It was illustrated by an Eisner Award-winning artist, Gideon Kindle. And another thing that I did recently, I'm working on a graphic novel with the screenwriter of who co-wrote RoboCop and adapted Starship Troopers, which are like my all-time favorite, amongst my all-time favorite movies. Ed Neumeyer, he's the nicest guy ever, and Livio Ramondelli is who draws for Transformers, is the artist. So we're doing our own original thing that we're excited about.
Awesome! Congratulations!
And I'm also working on other things that are yet to be announced that I'm really stoked about. So I think that the most important thing is, like, for anyone out there who wants to do creative work, is just do creative stuff. You know, like, it was a random short story that I wrote years ago that eventually got published in Heavy Metal that got me on a He-Man. So you just never know where things could lead to. So anyway,
that's really awesome that you had that going on. And when can we see some of these products coming out?
So right now, Other Worlds is available. Feel free to ping me on Instagram at Joshua Skywriter, or reach out to me on social. But I've been just sending them direct. I also have a line of short stories which I call Bubble Pulps. I'm a really big fan of pulp fiction, science fiction, and fantasy and horror, like the 30s through the 50s and the Golden Age. So I wanted to do modern science fiction, horror, and fantasy, but in a collectible fashion. So I created this line of like standalone short stories. Each one's different, and those are available also for digital or physical. And there are many other things I'm working on and conventions. The latest convention I'm going to is Jewish Comic Experience in New York, and supposedly I'm going to New Zealand and Australia for Armageddon. So I'm really excited about that for 2024. So that'll be really cool.
Well, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. I have a great time doing these things. I hope you enjoy the episodes that we create.
100%, dude. I just want to say I really love the work that you're doing, the adaptations, the voiceover, and bringing everything to life. It's just so cool. One of my favorite things is to, just pop it on the TV when I'm like in the living room, and I'll just watch it with my wife and my dog, or sharing it with friends and stuff. And the passion that's brought by the fans and their own creativity is so cool. And Masters of the Mini Comics is a great channel. I really enjoy watching your stuff. It's so fun. So definitely keep up the good work.
All right. Yeah. If anybody have any questions for Josh, just post it in the comments, please. He checks it out. He's a subscriber. He watches. He's an awesome dude. Check him out on Instagram. Thank you, Josh, for your time, sir. And we'll talk soon.
Aloha. Thanks for having me, man.
All right. Hey guys, Rob here. Thanks for listening to my interview with Josh Sky. Josh, thank you so much for your time, sir. I really do appreciate it. And of course, we appreciate everything you do for the Masters of the Universe community and He-Man as a whole. If anybody's interested in getting a hold of these comics that we talked about today, please just go on your internet website and look up any of the waves of the Motu Origins action figures, and you'll be able to find most of these comics. They're still for sale on Big Bad Toys or Entertainment Earth. Now, if you like this content, please feel free to subscribe, share, follow, make some comments, ask some questions in the comments section, and feel free to hit me up on Instagram or TikTok at Masters of the Mini Comics, or of course I'm on Twitter at Motu Mini Comics. Thank you so much for listening to the channel, and stand by for more from Masters of the Mini Comics.